Welcome back, everyone, to Baha'i on Air. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jane. And today we're going to take a deep dive into a pretty significant piece of writing in the Baha'i world.
Yeah.
A letter from the Universal House of Justice dated January 18th, 2019, to the Baha'is of the world.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Yeah, it is.
And for our listeners who may not be familiar with the Baha'i faith, the Universal House of Justice is the international governing body of the Baha'i faith. That's
right.
Located in Haifa, Israel.
Yeah.
And this letter really offers a Baha'i perspective on this ongoing journey that humanity is on toward peace.
Right. And, it talks about the progress, the challenges that persist, and really how we can all play a part in contributing to a more peaceful future for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into this thing.
Okay.
January 18, 2019. The letter right away draws our attention to a historical parallel, right?
Yeah.
That 50 years before Bahá'u'llah's initial call for peace among the leaders of the world, World War I erupted. And the letter describes it as a conflagration of horrific severity.
And it really just highlights how powerful that call for unity was that Baha'u'lláh made in the face of all that devastation.
Right.
That there was such a huge deal. And right in the middle of it, he's like, hey, come together.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, too, because the letter points out that this was also the centennial of the Paris Peace Conference.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
100 years before this letter was written, which is basically right now as people are listening to this.
That's true.
And, obviously that conference was convened after the suffering of World War I, and there was this widespread hope for a new world order that would prevent future catastrophes.
Right.
But the letter makes an interesting point that the journey toward peace has been anything but like a straight upward climb.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And, Shoghi Effendi, the guardian of the Baha'i faith, describes it as this kind of fitful force.
Right.
It's not a steady progression. It's advances and setbacks.
And the thing that's so cool, too, about how the Baha'i writings talk about peace is it's not just the absence of conflict.
Right.
It's about this, positive state of unity for humanity.
It's a completely different paradigm.
It's a total transformation, the way we see ourselves together.
Right.
And how we interact with each other on this global scale.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just okay, we're not fighting anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So the letter identifies 3 distinct periods during the last century where this aspiration for a kind of lasting peace seemed, closer than ever before, even though those hopes weren't fully realized.
Right.
So let's talk about those.
Okay.
So the first pivotal moment was the establishment of the League of Nations.
Okay.
Which happened after the Paris Peace Conference. And what's really insightful here is how the letter directly connects this to Baha'u'llah's teachings. For the first time, the idea of a system of collective security, something that Baha'u'lláh had called for in his writings to the rulers of his time, was seriously envisaged, discussed, and tested.
Yeah, the League of Nations was a huge step,
right. Yeah.
But I think what we learned from that is that while it's so important to have a global body to help resolve these international issues,
right,
it ultimately lacked the kind of enforcement power it needed.
It did.
And the unity of vision among nations.
Right.
To really prevent another conflict.
Yeah.
And that's a lesson that I think is still relevant for us today.
Absolutely.
Because those flaws in the peace agreement that gave rise to the League and the rise of this aggressive nationalism led straight into World War II.
Yeah, and so it's from the devastation of that Second World War that we get our second moment of hope.
Yeah.
The formation of the UN, the United Nations.
Okay.
The letter emphasizes not only the creation of the UN, but also the fact that we were seeing the creation of international economic institutions and advances in codifying human rights and international law.
Yeah.
We were seeing decolonization movements popping up. We were seeing reflection
Totally.
from World War II.
It was this real push toward a more just and stable world.
Absolutely. But this period was also impacted by the Cold War.
Right.
Which was this ideological and geopolitical rivalry between the major power blocs at the time.
Yeah, and that was a scary time because it brought humanity so close to nuclear war.
Absolutely.
And it's crazy to think that we even survived that.
Right.
But the eventual peaceful resolution of the Cold War actually did bring about a renewed sense of optimism for a more unified world.
It did, yeah.
So that's kind of like the third moment.
Yeah, third moment is around the turn of the millennium.
Okay.
The letter talks about a renewed emphasis on international collaboration, a bunch of UN World Conferences on these critical global challenges,
Right.
and a sense of a global consensus emerging.
Yeah, and we started to see an increase in mandates given to international justice institutions as well.
Right.
And from a Baha'i perspective, I think it's so cool how the letter mentions the Millennium Forum and the Millennium Summit.
Right.
You know, bringing together civil society and world leaders around these Millennium Development Goals.
And these became focal points for global action.
Yeah, and it just showed that people were starting to see our shared responsibility for the planet and for each other.
But even with these strides, conflict still went on, and that journey toward peace remained uneven.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think all these moments together signaled this deeper global consciousness.
Yeah.
And this desire for things like justice and solidarity and collaboration, compassion, equality.
And those are the heart of Baha'i teachings, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've talked about those pivotal moments, but then the letter kind of shifts focus to the present century, and it highlights an intensification of new challenges and this kind of retreat from the promising steps forward that we saw in the late 20th century.
Yeah, what's going on?
Yeah, what's going on?
Why are we going backward?
Yeah, what are the big factors that are contributing to this regression?
Well, the letter points to a few different things.
Okay.
Like the increase in societal forces that are just fragmenting communities and nations instead of uniting them.
Right.
And we see this paradox of, you know, less extreme global poverty, but then this massive concentration of wealth in the hands of a very small elite. And that just breeds instability and resentment.
It's a recipe for disaster.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then you see that the relationships between people and governments and institutions are just strained.
They are.
They're antagonistic.
Yeah.
And there's just this lack of common ground.
It's like everyone's digging their heels in.
Yeah, exactly.
And refusing to see the other side.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can't forget about the role of religious fundamentalism.
Right.
Which the letter says is warping the character of communities, even nations.
Yeah. And, you know, from a Baha'i perspective, we believe in the harmony of science and religion and this kind of progressive nature of religious truth.
Right.
So these rigid interpretations that we see are a big obstacle to unity.
They are.
Yeah.
And on top of all that, there's this decline in public trust in institutions.
Absolutely.
Across the board.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes it's for good reason.
Right.
But it's also been exploited by people who want to undermine knowledge and create doubt and division.
It's almost like an industry now.
It really is.
You know?
They're creating chaos.
Yeah. Yeah, and the letter also talks about this weakening of shared ethical principles. And, you know, that makes it harder and harder to agree on even basic ideas of right and wrong.
Yeah. And how can we even move toward unity if we can't agree on what's right and wrong?
Right, exactly. And then finally, there's a declining will for international action, which is being hampered by racism and extreme nationalism and just factionalism in general.
It's like every man for himself.
Right.
Instead of working together.
Yeah, and so it's a pretty sobering picture of where we're at. But in this context, the letter gives this powerful reassurance.
Okay.
It says that the unification of humanity is unstoppable by any human force.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that is a core tenet of the Baha'i faith.
Yeah, and it's such a message of hope.
It is, but the letter is realistic too.
Okay.
It says that the path to this inevitable unity, it might be tortuous.
Right.
And all this current turmoil, it risks drowning out the voices that are calling for peace.
Yeah, it's like they're getting lost in all the noise.
Right. And it says that the disorder that we're seeing might even intensify.
Wow.
Until humanity as a whole makes a decision to move toward this enduring peace.
So it's like we have a choice to make.
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not going to be easy.
Right.
So here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The letter frames the achievement of universal peace as the destination of humanity's evolutionary journey.
Okay.
Guided by divine revelation. So Shoghi Effendi talked about this social evolution.
Right.
That started with the family unit, then the tribe, then the city-state, and then the nation.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that there's this inherent drive toward greater and greater levels of unity in society.
And Bahá'u'lláh coming is like the next step.
It is the next step. Yeah, and it's saying that humanity has reached this threshold of maturity where world unity isn't just some distant dream.
It's actually possible.
It's possible.
Yeah.
And the letter says that a global order that genuinely unifies all nations with everyone's willing participation is the only real answer to all these destructive forces that we're dealing with.
It's the only way forward.
Right. At the heart of this process is the principle of the oneness of humankind.
Right.
And the letter says that while world unity is inevitable, it's realizing this unity depends on accepting this principle. And it quotes Shoghi Effendi as saying that this principle is the pivot round which all the teachings of Bahá'u'lláh revolve.
And that's not just some philosophy for Baha'is.
No.
That's like a practical thing that should guide our lives.
It should affect everything.
Everything.
Yeah. So the letter is saying that understanding and accepting that humanity is one people, that has to be the foundation for any new world order.
Absolutely.
And it means that we have to completely reevaluate all our relationships.
Yeah, not just between countries.
Right.
But also within our own societies.
Right. We've got to dismantle all forms of prejudice and discrimination.
Exactly.
That get in the way of us recognizing our shared humanity.
Yeah.
And the letter also talks about this crisis of identity.
Okay.
Where different groups are struggling to define themselves. And this is leading to division and conflict.
Yeah, and that us versus them mentality.
Right.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. And so how does the Baha'i perspective offer a different way of understanding identity and how to foster unity?
Well, the Baha'i view is that humanity is on a common journey.
Okay.
And all the diversity that we see is not something that divides us.
Right.
It's actually a beautiful tapestry that enriches our experience.
And it strengthens our oneness.
It does.
Yeah.
And the letter says that Baha'i unity isn't about uniformity.
Right.
It's not about everyone being the same.
It's about embracing that diversity.
It is.
Yeah.
And true unity comes from love.
Right.
From transcending these smaller loyalties and putting the well-being of humanity first.
Right. And allowing that diversity to flourish.
Exactly.
So what role does religion play in all of this?
Right.
The letter acknowledges that religion has been a source of division.
Yeah, historically that's true.
But it also highlights its potential for good.
Right.
And, you know, this resonates so much with the Baha'i teachings on the harmony of all the world's religions, that they all come from the same source.
Yeah.
So what does the letter say?
Well, it says that the purpose of religion in its purest form is to foster unity by harmonizing all these seemingly different parts of ourselves and of society.
Right.
And it's about nurturing this selfless love.
Absolutely.
In everyone.
Yeah.
And it talks about the power of religious leaders and communities to do good.
Right.
But it also warns us about the dangers of misusing religion to cause fanaticism and prejudice and violence.
Right. And the letter quotes Baha'u'lláh as saying that we shouldn't make religion a cause of dissension and strife. And he says that peace for all is a principle of God.
Yeah, and for Baha'is, that's huge.
That's a big deal.
Because it means that we need to work together with people of all faiths to achieve peace.
So given all the disunity that we see,
Right.
how does the letter guide us to respond in a constructive way?
Well, it encourages anyone who loves humanity to really feel the pain of disunity.
Yeah.
But it also says that we shouldn't get caught up in the conflicts themselves.
Right.
Or use the same divisive methods.
Right. We don't want to fight fire with fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it says that no matter how bad things seem, there's no reason to give up hope.
There is always hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the letter quotes Baha'u'lláh, who compares humanity to someone who's sick.
Okay.
And he says that we need to strive to save humanity's life with this medicine.
Oh, wow.
That the unerring physician has prepared.
So basically it's saying we need to take action.
Yes.
To heal the world.
Absolutely. And so this leads us to the role of Baha'is themselves in all of this. The letter makes it clear that establishing peace is everyone's responsibility.
It is.
But it also says that Baha'is have always been called to be active participants.
Right, not just watching from the sidelines.
Yeah, as leaven to the world.
I love that.
It's a great analogy.
It is.
And the letter quotes Baha'u'lláh as saying that we should focus on the well-being and education of the entire human race.
Okay.
As the best way to get rid of conflict.
Right.
And establish this unity.
Yeah. And Abdu'l-Bahá also talked about the importance of establishing peace in our own hearts first, as the foundation for peace in the world.
It starts with us.
It does.
Yeah.
And he really encouraged the Baha'is to develop love and spiritual communion with everyone.
Yeah, and the letter specifically references the promise of world peace.
Oh, yeah.
Which was this statement from the Universal House of Justice back in 1985 that lays out the Baha'i perspective on peace.
Yeah, and it offers the global Baha'i community as a model.
As a model for how this can work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so how are Baha'is putting this model into action?
Well, in a lot of ways.
Okay.
Like, we raise our children to be free from prejudice.
Right.
We champion the equality of women and men.
Absolutely.
We have these amazing educational programs that address both the material and spiritual needs of humanity.
Yeah.
We're involved in social action to address these problems in society.
Yeah.
We have devotional gatherings that are open to people of all faiths.
Right.
And we have this incredible youth who are building communities based on peace and justice.
It's really inspiring to see.
It is.
Yeah.
And all of this is based on the recognition of the oneness of humankind.
Right.
That's at the heart of everything we do.
And, the letter also highlights the growing capacity of Baha'is to engage in these meaningful conversations with people from all walks of life about how to create spiritual and material well-being using Baha'i principles.
And it's great to see that more and more leaders and thinkers
are
recognizing the unique perspective that the Baha'i faith offers.
Yeah. And these contributions are rooted in Baha'u'llah's revelation and experiences of Baha'is all over the world. And the aim is always to elevate the conversation, to go beyond just arguing and offer solutions.
And we do that through consultation, which is this Baha'i process of collaborative decision-making.
So it's not just about ideas, it's about action.
Exactly.
And the letter specifically encourages professionals in all fields to bring their expertise to the table and contribute to these discussions about peace. So the letter concludes by reiterating that for Baha'is, peace is not just some nice idea.
No, it's not.
It's a fundamental religious belief.
It's core to who we are.
It is, and it references Abdu'l-Bahá's statement to the Central Organization for a Durable Peace in The Hague, where he says that the Baha'i desire for peace comes from our religious conviction and the eternal foundations of God's faith.
So it's not just something we want. It's something we're called to.
Yeah, and Abdu'l-Bahá also made the point that just knowing about the horrors of war isn't enough. We need a power of implementation.
Yeah, we have to put it into action.
And he identified that power as the penetrating influence of the Word of God and the confirmations of the Holy Spirit.
So we need that spiritual foundation
to
make peace a reality.
And the letter ends with this affirmation that building spiritual communities and applying these divine principles in our lives is the best way to bring about world peace. Yeah. So this has been a really enriching deep dive into this letter from the Universal House of Justice.
It has.
And it's so clear that the journey toward peace is complex and it's ongoing.
It is.
But this Baha'i belief in the unification of humanity and this call to action, it offers a powerful message of hope.
It does.
For all of us.
Absolutely.
And for all of you listening, we encourage you to really think about the oneness of humankind and how important it is to have unity that embraces diversity.
Yes.
And how much we need to take action.
It's not enough to just talk about it.
No, it's
We have to do something.
We do. So think about how you can apply these principles in your own lives.
Yeah, in your own community.
In your families.
In your workplaces.
Everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
And if you want to learn more, we highly recommend checking out the Baha'i writings.
Yeah, The Promise of World Peace is a great place to start.
Absolutely. And there are so many other messages from the Universal House of Justice that can really deepen your understanding. And you can find these online or through your local Baha'i community.
Yeah.
So finally, we want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
How can you become a more effective protagonist in this journey toward a peaceful and unified world?
It's a question worth pondering.
It is. Thank you so much for joining us on The Deep Dive.